This is the new Marine One, America's most advanced presidential helicopter. But before it ever carried a president, this $217 million machine was a suspect in its own engineering disaster. It scorched the White House lawn, it failed critical communications tests, and the Pentagon explicitly labeled it not operationally suitable. I want you to look closely at the helicopter waiting on the south lawn. It looks like a standard Sikorsky VH-92A Patriot. But beneath that iconic white top paint scheme lies a story of ambition, failure, and the terrifying physics of keeping the commander-in-chief alive. This aircraft represents the only thing standing between the president and a very long, exposed walk to Air Force One. But getting it here required solving a problem that no commercial helicopter has ever faced. The commercial S-92, the civilian ancestor of this machine, was built for a hard life hauling oil workers to offshore platforms. The requirements were straightforward. Get there, get back, and don't crash. Airlines trust it because it is reliable. But the Marine Corps took those reliable bones and added requirements that pushed the airframe to the absolute brink of what physics allows. Here is the evidence of the problem. Weight. They wrapped the cabin in armor plating. They installed ballistic glass in every window pane thick enough to stop a rifle round, but heavy enough to kill aerodynamic performance. They added self-sealing fuel tanks designed to close around bullet punctures. Then came the redundant flight computers, the hydraulic backups, the classified communications suite, and the electronic warfare systems. Suddenly, you are looking at an aircraft that weighs nearly 27,000 pounds fully loaded. The commercial version tops out at 3,000 pounds. That might not sound like much to you, but in the world of rotary wing aviation, it is catastrophic. A fixed-wing aircraft can handle extra weight by just using a longer runway. A helicopter cannot. It has to lift straight up, hover in place, and land on a patch of ground the size of a tennis court. So, why did they do it? Why push a proven design to the breaking point? Because Marine One does not get to have single points of failure. But this decision forced the engineers into a corner. The rotor system now had to work harder. The transmission, which used to transfer force smoothly, began absorbing massive stress. Under the cowling, the VH-92A runs two General Electric CT-78A6 turboshaft engines. These are the same engines found in the civilian version, but here, they are operating in a completely different reality. Sikorsky faced a brutal choice: accept reduced performance or push the engines to their thermal limits. For an oil taxi, you accept the reduction. For the president, you push. This push is where the story gets tense. The CT-7 produces about 2,500 shaft horsepower per engine. The civilian operators manage them conservatively to extend their life. Marine One runs them hot. If a threat appears and the pilot needs to climb immediately, those engines must deliver maximum power instantly. The maintenance schedule pays the price in blood and treasure. We see engine components replaced far more frequently than any airline would tolerate, simply because replacement parts are cheaper than swearing in the vice president. But how do you manage engines that are constantly flirting with the red line? You don't. You let a computer do it. This is where the FADEC system full authority digital engine control takes over. It does something a human pilot simply cannot do. Sensors buried deep in the turbines monitor temperature, pressure, and shaft speed, feeding data to computers that make micro adjustments faster than human reflexes allow. When the pilot demands power, FADEC manages the transition to prevent the temperature spikes that would melt the turbine blades. Why is this critical? Because without this digital intervention, the pilot would be forced to stare at the engine gauges, babysitting the temperatures instead of flying the aircraft. FADEC keeps the engines inside their limits, even when those limits are terrifyingly close. It allows for the redundancy that defines this mission. If one engine fails, the other takes the load. If both fail, the rotors store enough aerodynamic energy for a survivable, albeit violent, emergency landing. However, 5,000 horsepower is useless if you can't translate it into lift. That is the job of the transmission, and this is where the weight problem nearly broke the entire program. The main rotor spans 56 feet. 4 composite blades cut the air, generating the lift to hold that 27,000-pound armored tank in a hover. On the commercial version, this system has comfortable margins. On Marine One, those margins were spent on armor. Each blade is a marvel of engineering, a titanium spar spine wrapped in fiberglass skin and filled with honeycomb aluminum. They are stiff, light, and strong, but they are working harder than they were ever designed to. The complexity at the rotor head is dizzying. The blades change pitch 225 times per minute, tilting and twisting in a chaotic dance to steer the aircraft. The transmission sitting between the engines and the rotors is solving a physics problem that shouldn't exist, stepping down 20,000 revolutions per minute from the engines to just 225 revolutions per minute for the rotor, handling forces that would tear a lesser machine apart. And yet, Despite this mechanical violence occurring just feet above his head, the president feels nothing. This is the deception of the VH-92A. It uses active vibration control systems, sensors that detect the oscillations of the rotor and actuators that generate counter vibrations to cancel them out. The cabin remains smooth and quiet. But this isn't about luxury. Why does vibration matter? Because stability is non-negotiable when you are reading classified briefings or, more importantly, when your secure communications equipment needs to maintain a signal. And that brings us to the smoking gun of this investigation. The reason the program was delayed for years. The VH-92A was declared technically ready in 2021. The president didn't fly on it until August 2024. That 2.5-year gap exists almost entirely because of the communication suite. You have to understand the stakes. Marine One has one job that no other helicopter shares: maintaining nuclear command authority in flight. The president must be able to authenticate his identity, receive threat briefings, and issue launch orders from the cabin. The encryption must be unbroken. The transmission must be instantaneous. During testing, these systems failed. Encrypted channels dropped. Systems that worked on the ground malfunctioned in the air. The Marine Corps refused to sign off. For years, while the engineers scrambled to fix the wiring, the president was forced to fly on VH-3D Sea King's ancient airframes that had been in service since the Nixon administration. These were technological fossils, kept in the air by maintenance crews performing miracles. What finally made the VH-92? A work remains classified, but the capability is now undeniable. Secure voice channels, real-time data links, and satellite uplinks that cover the polar regions. The cockpit reflects this new reality. Gone are the analog gauges of the past. In their place, 4 glass displays dominate the panel. 3 independent flight computers cross-check each other. If one goes rogue, the other 2 override it. If GPS is jammed, inertial systems track the aircraft's position using gyroscopes, navigating by dead reckoning alone. As the helicopter crosses the Potomac, with the Washington Monument sliding past the ballistic glass, we enter the most dangerous phase of the narrative. Routine is a luxury Marine One cannot afford. For the next few minutes, the president is a slow-moving target following a predictable path. We have to assume someone is watching with hostile intent. The defensive systems on this aircraft exist because that assumption is likely correct. The VH-92A is covered in missile warning sensors. They scan for the specific heat signatures of shoulder-fired missiles, the kind of weapons that have downed helicopters in every conflict zone for the last 40 years. Helicopters are heat factories. The exhaust and friction make them glow on infrared sensors. When the VH-92A detects a lock, it reacts faster than the crew can think. Flares eject to distract the missile. Directed infrared countermeasures, lasers fire to blind the missile's seeker head. Electronic warfare systems jam radar frequencies, filling the spectrum with noise to prevent a target lock. But the most effective defense is deception. Marine One never flies alone. Multiple identical helicopters launch simultaneously, weaving a shell game in the sky. From the ground, they are indistinguishable. An assassin has to guess which one carries the target. As the aircraft begins its descent into Joint Base Andrews, the tension peaks. This is the moment of vulnerability. The defensive systems stay active until the wheels stop rolling. The helicopter touches down. The rotors begin their slow wind down. The mission is a success, but how we got here is a story of political pressure and engineering brinksmanship. Remember, this aircraft was supposed to be ready in 2020. It was delayed because it scorched the White House lawn. Exhaust temperatures were literally burning the historic grass. It was delayed because the Pentagon called it unreliable. It was delayed because the communication systems couldn't hold a signal. But look at the result. The Marine Corps is now operating a fleet of 23 of these machines, retiring the ancient Sea Kings that served through every administration from Ford to Biden. The transition was painful, expensive, and late. But the VH-92A has finally met standards that no other helicopter has ever had to meet. The president walks toward Air Force One, likely unaware of the thousands of failure points that were managed, mitigated, and overcome to get him there. The systems held. The armor wasn't tested, but it was there. The engines screamed, but they didn't break. The VH-92A is a testament to the fact that when the mission is critical, we will force physics to bend to our will. This is the new standard. A machine built on the bones of an oil worker's taxi, transformed into a flying fortress. It is over-engineered, over-budget, and absolutely necessary. Because in this line of work, you don't get to have a bad day.